take the kids out. I feel.
All right, everybody, we'll call the meeting to order. It is 5:45 p.m. Thanks for being here for our special board meeting of June 29th, 2026. We'll start with roll call.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Dave Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart.
Here.
Rachel Henderson.
Here.
Dale Dahlke.
Here.
Emily Hines.
Here.
Michelle Dupree.
Here.
Angela Wolf.
Here.
Jay Ingeborg.
Here.
We have a quorum. Let's stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under mission statement, the school district of the Menominee area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Do we have any proposed changes to the agenda order tonight? Seeing none, we have no recommendations or commendations tonight, so we will move on to community communications. So we have two speakers signed up. First will be Josie Pillman.
Hi, my name is Josie Kellen and I'm from NAP, which is in the Menominee School District. Members of the board and Dr. Zadowski, perhaps you have heard New Richmond School District is being sued by Moms for Liberty. Do you know why? I'll tell you. In a New Richmond school last year, a young lady, Ella, was changing using a girl's bathroom when a male person entered the space. She was alarmed and initially did not even tell her parents. What would you do? Ella eventually decided to tell her parents. She talked it over also with her peers. The bathroom and locker rooms were no longer a safe place for girls to go to. Speaking to the school board did not seem to help change things. As you know, here in Menominee, I've been concerned for some time about the SDMA gender policy plan, which allows, even encourages males who have gender dysphoria to enter girls-only spaces. This policy has not yet changed. As a school board, you are responsible for the oversight of the education and safety of our precious children and young people. You work hard to give the educators the tools and support they need to teach with patience, kindness, encouragement, and truth. A sound educator needs courage and strength to teach academic excellence and character. A sound and moral education instructs not only the mind, but also the heart. Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Our LGBTQ gender dysphoric friends are trying to tell us that they want an education built on their heart feelings, and they want us all to get on board with that no matter how wrong or how dangerous this philosophy is. No matter if running with this philosophy puts young girls in danger. These dysphoric students need an education of the heart. The girls simply need a safe place to go. Teachers and overseers must have the courage to teach the mind as well as the heart of LGBTQ gender dysphoric students. The SDMA needs a policy that legally protects the safe places of young female students. The SDMA prides itself in being an upstanding educational school district. The gender policy plan is failing our community when it does not educate the mind and it puts young female students at risk. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. I would advise the school board to take a lesson from the New Richmond School District. Get your policy revised before something bad happens. Thank you.
Okay, and our second speaker tonight is Lori Green.
in to speak at the safety of the high school parking lot entrances. As you're going south on Fifth Street West, and you're coming up the hill, that's an in and out entrance right there. However, there have been multiple times I have nearly been hit on my wheelchair, coming out between cars, and students flying up. These young drivers don't slow down enough, they don't pay attention, and they just fly through. I would like to bring the suggestion up that that entrance at the top of the hill be entrance only, the one coming out in the middle of the yard be exit only. Not just for my safety, but for other people that live in that area. There are a lot of disabled, a lot of elderly, and a lot of young families that are in that area. Me personally, I will not leave my home between 3 and 4 because I am afraid to go down Fifth Street. I don't feel anybody in this community should ever be afraid to go openly in the community like that, especially during those times. And if I do, I go the opposite direction and take a chance at no sidewalk down the street. I feel like it's something very important that really should be addressed. Officers have been there multiple times last school year, multiple, bumper to bumper accidents. I saw a child's bike get whipped right out from underneath them. The child was safe, no injury, but it's soon enough, something's gonna happen to somebody. And I live directly across the street in Country Apartments. I see it, I hear it every day, and I think it's something that should literally seriously be considered. Not just for the drivers, but for our community members. Because it's a situation that has me frightful. When my grandchildren want to come over after school, they're 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10. And I'm like, no, Nana will come and get you around 4:30. Why do I have to think about that? Why should that be something that even crosses my mind? But it does. And I've had communications with the mayor in town about sidewalk, community accessibility, but there at the high school, that's one of the places that scares me the most. And I feel like if somebody is up there and they're watching this after school, they would see what I'm talking about. But I would hate to see another school year come around and more close to accidents happen. Because I'm afraid one of these days, somebody's seriously gonna get injured. And I don't wanna see it be me or anybody else. So I would really appreciate if you guys could actually consider this as a safety, as, drivers, people walking. It's important for people that live up there. We've had a lot of us discuss it, talk about it, nobody wants to speak up. So here I am. I rode my wheelchair from the high school area, from my home, to be here. Because it's that important to me. My medications don't allow me to drive alone. So that is my transportation around the city of Menominee. And if I don't feel safe, what are other people feeling? I'm 56 and I've got 90-year-olds that live next to me and they won't even go out. And that's a shame.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no.
That was your time limit.
No, that's fine, that was about where I was going anyway, so, but no, thank you for, taking the time to listen to me and I hope you consider it.
Thank you.
You bet.
Next up, we have the personnel consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the personnel consent agenda.
So moved, Amy.
I second. Tonight we have 1 resignation and 3 new hires. Are there any questions or discussion about any of those items? All right, seeing none, let's vote. As a reminder, it's always sad to see some of our great staff leave and the window doesn't make them stay.
I will guess, I have to log back in, I guess.
Do you want to do a voice vote, Jay?
Yes.
Yes, is the vote.
Yes.
Yes, you want to do a voice vote. Alright, motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have the action agenda. First, we have approval of the preliminary budget for 2026-27. And I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Dominique, second by Angie. Are we looking at anything different from a couple weeks ago when we saw this?
No, it's the same.
Great. Any questions or discussion? There's a lot of documents here, and we really appreciate the amount of effort that went into putting this together. If there's no discussion, let's vote. Okay. Were you able to log in? Oh, so yes, vote from Jane. All right, and motion passes unanimously. Then we have our action item to approve meal prices for 2026-27. I'll entertain a motion.
Amy, so moved.
Second. Motion by Amy, second by Michelle. We have the school meal price increases that we discussed last time. Any questions or discussion about this? Thank Stacy Nelson for putting together such a great presentation last time and for figuring out how to keep our meal prices affordable and stepping up in small increments. All right, ready to vote?
Oh, yes.
And motion passes unanimously. All right, on to our discussion agenda. First up, we have a report on summer maintenance, and our buildings and grounds director is here to give that.
All right, thank you. So starting out on the list are some of the larger projects that we have planned. On the top of that list, 2 partial re-roofs this summer, one being at the high school in Wakanda. So the high school started about a week ago. You may have seen them up there with all their supplies. Hopefully not today. But we're doing the northeast section of the building. As early as tomorrow morning, we're expecting, I think, 3 large truck deliveries to Wakanda. So as soon as the work is completed at the high school, that crew's gonna move right over to Wakanda and keep moving on in our district. Part of doing this project, we're getting a little more insulation than we currently have, so we have reached out to Focus on Energy to get any incentives that we might qualify due to those upgrades. A couple more things at Wakanda, we're gonna be working on sidewalk replacements, so entrance 3 and 11, basically kindergarten wing in the back, heading out to the black playground. A little bit up in the area as to when that work will be done, just due to the large amount of traffic with the Revenue Project plan. We will squeeze that in this summer as well. Lastly, at Wakanda, the grease trap for the kitchen, near the receiving area is gonna get removed and replaced with a new one, due to the current one starting to rust out. Couple carpet jobs this summer, high school, middle school, and Oaklawn. So at the high school, we got an early start. Earlier this spring, we replaced the carpet in the main entrance vestibule. A little later this summer, we're gonna replace the carpet in the entire main office area. So office, principal's offices, conference room, staff lounge, that whole block, I guess you can call it, will be replaced. Over at Oaklawn, we're doing the music room and attached offices, and then at the middle school, orchestra practice rooms, and counseling are all going to get new carpet. All of those jobs are in some stage of being worked on right now, with the goal being by the time school starts, we'll be winding those down. NAP had 1 project scheduled for the summer, and we got a head start on it as well. We replaced the hand wash station outside the students' restroom. So about a week ago, that was brought into service, and that project is now done. The next few projects that I have listed here are more, the front end work, that Brendan and I will be working on. So, bidding specs and RFP work. For the pool project, our engineering team is actually working on the bidding specs of that. It's a little complicated to put all that information together, so we're relying on them to get us the information that we need, and then we will take over the bidding process from there. Our goal here is to bid the project out September-ish, sometime this fall, with work to start March of 27 after swim season is complete. Then we have a couple door projects that we still need to get RFPs out for. Oak Lawn will be getting a number of new exterior doors, hardware, glass, all that good stuff. And then the middle school, a little bit more involved, but we'll be cutting into a block wall to put a garage style overhead door. And that will allow better supervision between the weight room and the multi-purpose room. Then finally, in the planning stage, the River Heights bus loop. This one keeps biting us. This year, immediately after the third-year plan was approved, it was the first week in February, we reached out to get the ball rolling, and at that time, for this particular summer, it was determined that there is too much work in the area, contractors are busy, and we were advised we wouldn't get enough bids on the job. We're gonna start it over this fall, so we can hopefully move forward next spring and or summer on that project. Then, overall parking lot maintenance, will be at the high school this year, so typical patching, crack sealing, and line painting. Only change here is that we are going to start, line painting in-house. We gave it a try this year. Earlier this spring on the north side of the high school, we painted all the parking lot lines there, and it turned out looking pretty good. So we should be able to get the majority of the district lines from here on out. A little bit of a cost savings for us. So speaking of maintenance, summers typically include, and this one will be no different, a lot of moving furniture and supplies, hauling things between schools, to storage, from storage, that kind of thing. Going through our storage, determining what's there, organizing, cleaning, are we gonna have an auction, are things in there that shouldn't be, that's part of our summer, task list for the maintenance staff. Maintenance staff typically work in the buildings more, helping our custodians do some light electric work, so like Alice, issues, things like that will all be taken care of over the summer months, as well as environmental site, help as needed, and athletic field maintenance, so painting lines, sweeping the new synthetic turf field, things like that. Then our custodial staff obviously have busy summers with all the deep cleaning that they do in the classrooms and common areas, so they work hard at getting that done in time, and that especially at the locations that have summer programming as another layer of activity in the buildings. Other things that we work on, and we will be working on this year, is applying floor finishes, scrubbing carpets, maintenance tasks, HVAC filters, all those types of things that we can get in and out of the areas a lot quicker, and be less obtrusive to education. So that's our to-do list. We do have some training scheduled again this summer, later in August, with CISA coming in to do a health and safety training with all the buildings and ground staff. But yeah, we have a lot planned, but we do have a good start on everything so far. Questions?
I have two questions. The first one, since it's on here, in the context of the public comment earlier, what would it take to, or would it, I don't want to ask too specific questions since you're not kind of perfect for it, but given that you're looking at repainting the lines and doing maintenance of the parking lots anyway, what would it take? Would it be plausible to do some sort of study of what might be possible in terms of grading and traffic flow? Is it conceivable, and how far in the distance would you have to look to make that sort of thing happen?
I don't know what the rules are off the top of my head. I would reach out to a contact, engineering or architecture firm type, people that design parking lots. I'm sure there's a number of, ins and outs that have to be the parking stalls, all that, those types of things that we would have to maintain, and go from there, really.
Do you know, and maybe this is exactly the same answer you just gave, but I am kind of curious if that is something that like the school district could choose to do, or if we would have to work with the city streets department?
I would assume permits would be involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think this even in like changing the flow of traffic, if that's something the city would have to approve or not.
My assumption is yes, it would if we change the current layout, and generally permits are required.
But that's something we can look into, as we continue our work this summer. I know we did make an adjustment at the middle school last year, where during certain times of the day, we're only allowing certain traffic patterns to occur. So there is a possibility it's gonna take some work. It's June right now, almost July, but this is something we can try to prioritize, and I'll be talking with Mr. Drake tomorrow.
I also wonder if that's, when you talked about like engineering, firms or something, sorry, I don't remember the words you said, but I wonder if that's a service that CISA would offer as well, if they do. I can imagine that like engineering the flow of traffic in school parking lots is a whole thing.
They're always a great place to start, yes.
And the other question was about, the pool, this is, you know, been, I think now we're in kind of a third year kind of this ongoing pool. Could you just give a quick synopsis of where we started 3.5 years ago and what each, like, what's been fixed and what you still see as remaining on that overall project?
So it all started with cracks in the floor that I was concerned students would get injuries from on the very western edge of the pool deck. So structural supports went in to keep the floor from moving. Once that was done, we upgraded our filtration. The prior system was a big open tank that our staff were hanging over trying to pull filters out, very unsafe. So that was replaced, the heat exchanger was placed, the controls, all that is up and running. In the process of doing that, we discovered that lines were becoming plugged from, late 70s after getting rid of the pool, which is common for cast iron pipes. So now we're to the point where we're gonna go into the deep end, remove them, put new piping in, and then fix the floor, retile or epoxy floor, make it look good like that never happened. And then explore other options such as upgraded bleachers, things like that.
Thank you.
I also appreciate the reminder of where we're at on the project and where we've been. Other questions or discussion on any of the items on the summer maintenance plan? Sounds like you've got your work cut out for you, but a good jump on things, so I hope the weather cooperates. All right. Next up, we have a review of the SDMA Education for Employment Plan.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to invite our career and technical education coordinator, Ryan Siri, and middle school counselor, Paula Kistner, to come on up and assist me with the presentation here. Education for employment is an annual requirement that we review. We've seen this before. A little bit of as far as background, included the summary of updates. Like most years, there's a series of editorial updates. We tweaked the formatting based on some updated templates that were available from DPI, but also trying to hold with the format that the prior years, as the board you said you appreciated how we have it laid out. Really, some of the big updates that we did this year was to include some additional information that has been part of what we do with Ed for Employment and academic and career planning, but was not necessarily part of this report. So, really when you take a look, the addition of what we do related to family engagement, individualized supports for students with from different populations, ensuring access for all students, but then really the last two pieces that we added in, taking a look at how we prioritize current and future goals. We've had academic and career planning as part of our major goals and activities for several years, but really trying to incorporate that into part of this process on an annual basis as well. And then professional development for staff. What we found over the last several years is we're doing a lot of things well, but like a lot of things, when you do it year after year, it just becomes part of what you do. Sometimes it's time to sit down and think about how you engage staff in the process and professional development for them. So When the three of us sat down and kind of talked through that, that really was a big part of what we did. So what you're seeing right now fits real well within our current major goals for Pillar 1. But Ryan is going to talk a little bit about some of the areas that, as a board, you had questions last year specific to articulated credits and dual enrollment, and Paul is going to provide an update on some of the updates at the middle school. So,
absolutely. Thank you, Brian. A few of the slides that I updated were one, the classes that we offer for articulated courses or articulated credit. And right now, currently at the high school, we do have over 20 that are offered through CBTC. And then we also have some at Stout as well, which aren't included on this list because this was more specific to career and technical education. Another slide that I updated too was our industry certifications, and I guess I don't have that one right in front of me, but overall, we have 109 industry certifications, which was up from 2 last year. And we try to focus more on youth apprenticeships if possible, if we have to focus on one or the other, because it does, it provides more funding for the school. We get funding for a youth apprenticeship grant. We work through CISA 10 on that, as well as that can also be used for, excuse me, I was in the dust all day here, but CT incentive grant. So it does provide a good deal of funding for the school. Another slide that I did update, this was a request from last year. 2 slides that I updated were, one, how many classes or how many students earn dual credit, and CBTC always lags a year behind. They're currently pulling the information together for this year, but I did get the information for 2024-25. So in total, we had 318 students that earned dual credits through CBTC. A total of 1,904 credits were earned at a savings then, or students would have saved if they do decide to take these classes there, over $284,000. So that was a slide that we did add. That was new as of this year, requested last year. And another one that I included too, and we just got this information last week, so probably a day or 2 before Brian submitted the report, but we included students who earned associate's degrees and technical diplomas. And one of the things we're trying to do, we work to do is package our articulated offerings into an academy where students can earn a certification and earn a technical diploma, associate's degree, so you can see on the list. In some of these certifications or technical diplomas are embedded within our academies. For instance, the business generalist, we have 4 students that earn that. Our business management academy, we had 12 students earn an associate's degree, which is great because it transfers to UW Stout, it also transfers to Madison and a number of other universities. So it's really great when kids can ladder these degrees. Electrical maintenance academy, 2 students, and then the CNA or nursing assistant, we had 14 students, and that's within the pre-nursing academy. So, and students don't get specific diploma for that academy, but they do have a number of classes that will transfer directly into CBTC, and then they'll get accepted right into the nursing program there. My daughter's a part of that. It's been a fantastic opportunity. So those were the slides that were updated from last year, and some of them that were requested that we had. So I think that's all.
Yeah, I can talk from the middle school standpoint. So I'm Paula Kistner, I'm one of the counselors at the middle school. Worked at the high school for a few years with Ryan, but went to the younger kids a little bit. What I love about working at the middle school is we get to be that bridge between the elementary and the high school. And we take that very seriously when we do academic and career planning. So I talk with the elementary counselors, learn about the soft skills, the employability skills that they're already teaching the elementary kids, and then we bridge that right into the middle school and start teaching that with our 6th and 7th graders. Our teachers are fantastic. They teach this during homeroom, so it's taught by all of our staff members. And so then when we get into 8th grade, I take more of a lead role on that because I partner a lot with the high school. to make sure that students first know what are the career paths after high school. It's not just college, you know, there's apprenticeships, there's workforce, there's a lot of opportunities right here in Menominee for that. Junior Achievement partnered with us the last 2 years, and they offer Junior Achievement JA in a day, where volunteers will come from the community and do an on-site career event, exploration event. They teach lessons on soft skills, on career clusters. They have an entrepreneurship panel where you can hear from local entrepreneurs. The kids, that's one of their favorite things actually, is to hear from those folks. And then they do a career fair where there's booths in our gym, and the kids, we don't have to bus them anywhere. You know, it's right there, and they get so much out of that event. So it starts in 8th grade where we're talking about what's out there, right? Then we really partner with the high school on what does our high school offer to help you get there, right? And so we give them those introductions on what is a transcription credit, what is an articulated course, what are some of the opportunities that our high school offers, and then we help with that registration process to streamline that. To get kids placed into the correct courses in the high school, what works with them. We're partnering with parents all along the way. We offer conferencing individually with parents as requested at the middle school level, so that they feel like they're making an informed decision for their child heading into high school. So it's a really nice, awesome bridge to be in the middle school, because it kind of culminates all of that and gets them ready for all the cool stuff they got at the high school.
So then to wrap up for questions here. As we present this evening, it's your option to review. You're required on an annual basis to approve this. So this is something that will come back at the next meeting for approval. But at this point, happy to take any questions, and I'll defer them to
Before I make you answer questions, do you want a bottle of water, Mr. Chair?
No, I'm okay.
Now go ahead, any questions or discussion?
Did you say that the prior year industry certification there were 2?
No, we're within 2, we improved.
Within 2?
Within
Okay,
2,
thank you.
yeah.
I was like,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
believe
crazy
107
number.
real close on this.
That's what, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been tracking this very closely, and terrific job to all of you and all of our staff. I am also very well aware that as great of a job as we're doing, there's a lot more opportunity to do even better. I know you've had discussions, especially at the high school level, about what maybe some of the barriers are and maybe some of the opportunities. Do you have any comments, any additional comments about, you know, what could be done to even do better next year?
Sure. I think one of the things that we're always working towards, and Casey does a great job of, you know, leading our academic and career planning committee, is uncovering all the academic and career planning activities that are going on in various classes. I think a lot of times there's pockets of things going on that maybe we're not aware of. And to inventory all of that, one of the things we did with the help of Katie, and thanks on that, Katie, we put up a TV in the guidance area, so that way we can hopefully better inform students of the different field trips, the different activities that are coming up, and to work with them and hopefully better advertise those. One of our goals too is to include all the job opportunities. So when students maybe come to myself or another instructor looking for a job, we can refer them right to that television. All those jobs are posted right there. So those are some of the opportunities, as well as, I believe, continuing to add articulated classes wherever we can, to package them into academies. And then within these academies, we'll look for industry certifications that are embedded so we can fund them, because there is a cost to all of these academies. And the more we can do of that, the better we can fund it. And being aware of those grants as they come up to better fund them. So those would be some of the improvements and moving forward growth that I feel we can do.
I think that's terrific. I think having more exposure on TVs and things like that will be helpful. I also believe that the direct communication and direct relationships with our staff members is probably even more impactful. where are our kids getting that direct communication with staff members, and is there any opportunity there for continued improvement?
Yeah. I think, one, in all the classes, I think academic career planning should be embedded in all of our classes. And really, I think whatever it is we teach, we need to inform students, how are they gonna use this? And, they can use it in a variety of different ways, but that's one area. Also our homerooms too. And, we're in contact, homeroom instructors are in contact with the kids every day. And what a great time I always feel that's one of the most important things is to get to know the kids. And if you get to know the kids, I think from that point, good things will happen. You get to know them personally, know what their interests are, what they do outside of school, what their plans are moving ahead, and, using that time, for those types of activities. Yeah.
I think that's terrific, and I think many of our teachers, like you, do a wonderful job at that. And I know that we're asking a real lot of our homeroom teachers, we already are, but I think this is something we're gonna have to prioritize. Because I think we all understand how important this is, that when our kids feel there's purpose behind their learning, they're gonna learn better, it's gonna mean more to them. And I see a great opportunity here, so awesome job so far, can't wait to see this report again next year.
Thank you.
I'd like to put an exclamation point behind what you just said, because I think those classroom teachers really have to talk about the opportunities in their field and why that information that they're learning is important. And I want to congratulate you on a great report, and I saw the percentages of people going to tech schools versus going to four-year universities. But I wondered, do you have how many of our students do one or the other total? What percentage are going on to post-secondary education?
Yeah, I can hop in on that. So right now, depending on the year, we're in the high 50s to about 64% of our graduates go on to some type of post-secondary school. And of that group, then that's that breakdown of the percentages that, the majority of them on annually between 24 and about 34% of the ones that go on to either a 2 or 4-year school, select a 2-year school. But, like Mr. Siri and Ms. Fisker talked about, providing the opportunity for students to learn what the options are is a great piece. And that's one of the reasons why we added that current project progress and future goal piece, because knowing that we have only 64% of our students go on to a 2 or 4-year school, what are those other options and what does that look like, and making sure that our staff are well aware of how those institutions in and of themselves have changed over the last 25 years. Thank you.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the added slides and the attention to what folks are asking for, what we were all asking for last year. I'll admit I forgot some of the things I asked for, but it was really nice to see them here and realize that was what I wanted to see. So I really appreciate that attention to detail. And I do also want to just express support as a mom of a middle schooler. Like, I'm aware of all of this stuff going on, and the kind of conversations that he's bringing home is fascinating to me. Because I don't think I had that when I was in middle school, so thank you. Any final questions or discussion? All right, so we will vote on this to approve this report at our next meeting. Thank you. And next up, as we shuffle chairs again, we have the human resources report. Thank you for being here.
Well, Sam is getting her stuff readjusted. I know board members, there's a lot of data in these slides, and it's important data. In the interest of time, I have asked Sam to kind of hit the high points and make sure there's time for questions. But so she's going to go through the slides relatively quick, but please be sure to ask any questions you might have.
I think that's his way of saying that I can be long-winded.
Not at all.
All right, thank you for going through all of this with me.
So just want to remind everyone that this report that's generated, all of the information that I pull, runs from July 1st of 2025 through June 30th of 2026. So barring a resignation tonight or tomorrow, this should be as updated as possible. A couple of things that I just want to highlight on the slides. If you look at, I believe it's the third slide where we talk about the total number of employees and break it down by classification group. Last year, and again, you don't have this information in front of you, but I'm just gonna do a few quick comparables. Last year, we had a total of 406, I should say, for the 24-25 school year, we had a total of 463 employees. This year, we have 448. And of course, that is attributed to Downsville closing and then those positions being acquired into other positions within the district. So looking at the next slide, just the percentage of years of experience or years with our district, I should say. About 50% of our staff is within the first 5 years of employment. Keep in mind that this is not just teachers, this includes all of our employees. So it includes our paras, our custodial, our school nutrition, and about 70% of our employees are within their first 10 years. So we have a very young staff, which is I should say, it's a staff that has been with us for a shorter period of time. That doesn't necessarily equate to age, it's just the time that they've been with us. I think that this is probably reflective of the environment that we see, where, there is a lot of movement, more movement probably than 10, 15, 20 years ago with our staff, just more opportunities for people. Any questions about those first two slides? Okay. I'm gonna flip into the exiting staff statistics. I know that this is something that previously the board has kind of asked about, and specifically the exit survey. So I have more results with that, and I will get to that in just a second. But looking at the number of teachers that resigned, there is a bit of an increase over last year. And again, it kind of tends to be a bit of a free market. The other thing that we see is we do see a lot of people moving for personal reasons, leaving the district for personal reasons. I see not all that many people that are leaving to go to other districts. Most of the reasons that they're leaving is for personal and mostly for relocation. They're following a significant other, they're moving back home, and that tends to be the trend overall. And we will see that too on one of the next slides.
Sam, can I interrupt you real quick? I just want to clarify, on the far right column, that percentages, does that mean the percent of total staff that resigned?
Right.
Okay.
Well, if we're looking at the teachers, the 3.82% that's teachers that resign, that's of the total staff. But when we look at that compared to just the group of teachers, it ends up being 6.8%. So if you compare to the overall group, it's the 3.82%. But if you compare to just the teacher classification, it ends up being 6.8%. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you bet. And then I know paraeducators, this was an area that we really kind of honed in on last year and wanted to really talk about last year, and make sure that we did some things to try to improve keeping our paras. Again, there are a lot of things that I feel like we're doing well. I think that there are some things that we do need to improve. Onboarding and training is one of those pieces that I really want to focus on for this year, working with Tonya to roll out our handbook and do some mentorship with our paras. I think are a couple of ideas that we're really looking at. So there was an increase from 14 to 22 paras that resigned. I just wanted to note in there that 3 of those paras, however, this last year are being promoted into teacher positions. So we bring them in as paras, they do an amazing job for us, they finish up their degrees, and we find a spot for them in a classroom because we don't want to lose them and we understand their value. Any questions about those grids? Anything?
With the paras?
Yeah.
In the exit interviews, did they talk about reasons?
Usually I know that, they, in the exit surveys, they will sometimes mention things, that's more of a Google form and it's a wide variety of questions, and so a lot of times I will have had a discussion with them, and just kind of know why they're leaving. Same thing, with them, I'm just looking at it, I have everybody kind of on a grid, and, most of those are leaving for personal or other, personal reasons or other positions. So without getting into too much detail, as compared to like moving to a different district, or just like the elimination of their position or a termination, most of those are for personal or other reasons, other jobs.
And I could add to that a little bit. We have noticed with the hiring process since the pandemic, with unemployment being so low in the region, but really across the country, there's a lot of job opportunity. And like Sam said, I think it's a real mixture. Certainly some of it is compensation, some of it is preferred hours, preferred opportunities for growth, advancement. The other thing, our paras are limited to being a partial year, it's a school year position. And what we have heard, especially with the high cost of benefits, more and more people are not able to work in a position that is only 9 or 10 months a year. So we've had several people leave for 12-month positions in a different type of profession.
And I would say too, one of the things that we've done to combat that, we heard from our staff that winter break is a very difficult time for them because it can be 2 weeks without income. And so what we have done is we took 2 of our holidays, Memorial Day and Labor Day, and moved those to that time. So they actually get 4 days of holiday pay in that 2-week period. And so I think that has been appreciated. And that was one of the things that we did to try to help balance that out a little bit.
That was the same question I had, so I think most of it was answered. I'm curious about, I know we covered sort of the compensation is often an issue. I'm curious about if you have a sense of if there's a sort of divide with people getting the job and not knowing what it entails. Because I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I think that that's a fair question, and we really, and I emphasize that with my principals, and if I'm sitting in on the interview, excuse me, we really do try to help them understand what it is that they are going to be doing, so that they know at the interview process, what that's going to look like, what their position is going to look like. But there have been times, yes, where a para's been hired, they've worked for a few weeks and they've realized that the job isn't for them. But I also think that happens in a lot of other places as well.
It does, but I think it happens more with our paraeducators and the teachers, for instance. Another thing is many of our paras are working with children with very high needs. In some cases, medical needs. And we've had situations too where a para has been hired, understanding what the position was, but when it actually comes time to need to perform some of the duties, either it's a lack of confidence or realizing that those duties are more than what they sounded like. So that's part of it as well.
That's one of the things we wanna work on, is pairing them up with a mentor so that they have somebody that they can go to. But I will say that, like, when I go into the buildings and I talk with our special ed teachers and I talk with our paras, those that stay are very happy. We all have challenging days and they will talk about their challenging days, but they really form a strong unit, working together. And so that's a big part of it too, is just having that sense of belonging and that support, to help get them through those days. Good questions. As I mentioned, we're gonna move on to the slide that just says exiting teachers, and it has the little people on it. And so you'll see this is just specific to the teachers. So this year we had 16 teachers, and that's updated as of, like I said, today. And so we had 4 that accepted a position in a different district, 3 that accepted positions outside of public education, and then 10 that I would consider to be either personal reasons or relocation, kind of put those together because they seem to be related. Moving on to the exit survey, a couple of things just to note with that, we did work very hard to really beef up people doing the exit survey. I will say that we had a bit of a lull, we're down 9 as compared to last year. When Bethany left and we had some transition within the HR department, that was one of the things that got dropped a little bit, was sending out that exit survey when somebody resigned. And so I worked really hard with Sydney to get that up to speed and making sure that, especially at the end of the year as people are leaving, that we're getting those exit surveys out. So that will continue, I believe, to go up, but a small dip, I think, just because of that transition with Bethany leaving. The other thing that I want to note on there is from last year to, I should say from 24-25 to 25-26, our lowest was benefits at that 2.21 out of 5 in 24-25. And I want to make a note to let you know that this year, benefits in that exit survey jumped up to 3.7 out of 5. And what we saw a lot in the exit surveys, and believe me, I read those when they come in, I go back and read them again. At the end of the year, I come back and I kind of synthesize everything together. But we really jumped in that regard. And I do believe that adding Innovia, adding the HSA, kind of curtailing our benefits to our staff has been very helpful. That's one of the, Innovia was mentioned several times in that, but just the overall numbers really increased. People, maybe before, we were seeing trends of benefits being given a 1 or a 2 are now up to like a 3 or a 4. So that's been pretty consistent.
And just a reminder, Innovia is our near-site clinic.
Sorry, I assume that's sometimes. And then the lowest that came through this year was a 3.1 with initial training. And so you'll hear a little bit more about this later, but this is going to be one of our goals, one of our focuses for 26-27. So any questions about the exit survey? Okay, and then the last part is just our substitutes. And so I just want to mention real quickly, I'm gonna put a note, I already did this for next year, but the numbers don't always add up. So we have 79 active subs. It is down a little bit, and again, I attribute that to there are a lot of opportunities and people that typically have subbed for us before are maybe finding full-time jobs and therefore are not necessarily signing up to be part of our sub pool. But one thing to notice is that when our subs sign up, they don't just sign up for one classification. They sign up for multiple things. So they will sign up to sub as a teacher, to sub as a para, and to sub as clerical. That's just one example. So they can click and choose whichever ones they want to see on a daily basis. And so if you're adding up like the total subs in each of those classifications, it's not going to come up to 79 simply because they're counted multiple times in each of those classifications. So I asked Sid to tell me about the fill rates for our positions, and we had about a 70% fill rate overall this year, which is not great. When we just looked at teachers and paras, those are primarily the bulk of what we get subs for. We had a great percentage with our teachers, about 90% of our positions went filled for teachers. However, about 50% of our para positions went unfilled this year. So again, that's something that we're gonna continue to look at, continue to work on in a couple of different ways. So that takes care of the report. Any questions?
On the last slide, the total sub number is a pretty dramatic decrease from the last couple of years. So I'm, hopefully that can be brought up to the level we need to cover absences.
Yeah, a couple years ago, we did a couple of incentives. So we had, additional, I think we put an additional like $10 on Mondays and Fridays, to entice subs to come in during that time, but then as we didn't need that anymore, that kind of went away. We do have the incentive of a free lunch, for our teacher subs. And then we also, for any of our subs, or for, I should say for teacher subs, there's a $10 per day increase after 30 days that they have subbed. They also get a free pass to games, like a free activities pass, and they can also use the pool field house. So we try to incentivize, and I think we need to kind of put that out there again, and let subs know that those are some of the additional benefits to subbing.
I apologize because this question is like way out of left field because it just popped in my head. But I'm curious about, like I think maybe Eau Claire, and they're bigger than us, but uses like a different company, I think, to help source subs. Do you have any like thoughts about like if that would be a benefit or if we're headed that direction, or if that's not something we would ever need?
There are a lot of benefits, and believe me, I've looked into that. There are a number of different companies that will do that kind of handle your subbing for you. They don't always take care of the last minute pieces. We would still have to do that, and they're very, very expensive. At this point, because of the sub model that we have at the high school, we do not have to get subs for like our general ed classrooms. Those students come down to the commons area. And so when they price that out, when they price out what it would cost us, they do that based on the number of employees that you have. And so that isn't even a consideration. And so it becomes very costly for us to do that, so much more than the benefit would be. And again, we would still handle the last minute pieces. We would still have to have one of our clerical people calling in the morning, trying to fill some of those positions. So for a couple of reasons, I haven't gone in that direction, mainly because of cost, but there are certainly benefits as well. I mean, then those are not our employees, and so there are some benefits that go along with that with regard to like rehiring our retired teachers, and so I have weighed those options. At this time, I just don't see it financially being a move that we can make.
Yeah, that makes sense, thank you. I was just curious if having like that more kind of like manpower behind it would help like fill those, but it sounds like first of all, the cost wouldn't even be worth it unless we went back to actually having subs in classrooms at the high school.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Sam. My question is, first my comment, then my question. 50% for the para's absence is not filled, that's concerning. I'm wondering what, if it, like, is there any brainstorming happening, what could happen to try to help fix that, or what other districts are doing, or is that a need that is typical? We see, is it happening every year, or is this for some reason an odd year?
No, that's pretty typical, and when I talk to other districts as well, they also have a very hard time filling their para positions. I think that 50% is about 50 to 70% tends to be about the correct number that other districts experience as well. And for the same reasons that we have a hard time, I think, keeping our paras, it's a very physically and emotionally demanding job. And so even though we increase our pay every year, it still is very challenging to find people that want to do that. We also have a lot of our teacher subs that sign up to be paras, but they will obviously choose a teacher position over a para position because it pays better most of the time. And so that's where we end up, like sometimes we'll have somebody in a para position, but then last minute we get a teacher absence, and so we will ask them to move into the teacher position. So it's a tricky balance. Tonya and I talk about it quite a bit. I do talk with other HR directors about some ideas, but this is kind of, this is one of the things that we're gonna need to dig into and again, really try to hone in on this year.
first of all, I like the report very much. I think it's very helpful. I heard you say earlier that when you were talking about the lowest initial training, 3.1 out of 5, prior to that, you already said you were working on that, like, you know, for instance, that was something you needed to work on. So I appreciate that you're onto that.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you.
Any additional questions or discussion about the HR report?
I do have one more question. And Michelle kind of sparked this for me, and I'm not really sure if this is a question for you. I'm curious about, what 50% of absences unfilled, like what that looks like for parents, what that looks like, in terms of like hours of support for like our students who, because typically our parents are working with students that are kind of required to have help. And so then like what kind of a strain is that putting on kids getting the services that they need, if that makes sense? Which it might be, outside of this report.
No, and you're right, that's one, again, that's why Tonya and I work so closely on this piece of it, because the minutes of instruction are important and required, and so what happens is then other paras kind of shift their day to make sure that those students are getting the support that they need, and it really becomes more of a team effort, but then that pulls people in different directions, and so we recognize how hard that is. And you know, we do try to work with our paras, especially if we have some that maybe absenteeism is an issue. We will work with people individually to try to figure out where the barriers are. But in general, that's what happens is they just kind of pull from kind of spread our other paras more thin, or the teachers will kind of change up their schedule a little bit to provide support.
Yeah, that's a tricky kind of pendulum, because then it's not just that one teacher and the kids they work with that aren't getting like a normal day, it extends beyond that. A lot of people weren't getting their routine, right, which is tricky.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well, and I've seen this pendulum go back and forth, where for a while it was, you know, maybe reduce the number of teaching staff and increase the number of support staff. And, you know, it's gone back and forth, kind of depending on finances, depending on employment pools, depending on licensing requirements. There's all sorts of inputs to that equation. But one thing that we're very fortunate is the intervention model that we have. And I'm not saying it's a silver bullet where we don't have to worry about paras being gone, because it is impactful for sure. But the fact that we do have extra educators providing service through our interventions, both academically and behaviorally, we're in a much better position now compared to what, Brian, 4, 5, 6 years ago, it would be a way different situation. But regardless, not having positions filled is very difficult.
I just also wanted to mention that I appreciate that you are brainstorming that with other HR directors and working with other districts. And my computer went to sleep while I was talking, but, and again, this was an excellent report, and I also just, as with the previous report, it's really, really nice, that when we have questions or want more information 1 year, to just like see it come back the next year, so appreciate that effort. Absolutely, thank you. If there are no more questions or a discussion about the HR report, we will move on to review of the strategic planning goals and major activities for 2025-26.
Well, we're super excited to be able to share our final report with you of the progress made on our strategic plan during the past school year. Like we have said in other quarterly updates, it's been a major collaborative effort. Nothing on this list would have been accomplished without the great work of our entire staff, from our paras and teachers to our other support staff members, to the principals and administrative team. Everyone has really worked hard to accomplish the goals and meet the expectations that were laid out last summer. We aren't going to go through each one item by item, because we're looking at over almost 30 pages. But what we're going to do is similar to some of the previous updates, we're gonna mention one area of each pillar. And actually, some of the items you've already heard about tonight, like for instance, academic career planning, what we heard about, that was part of our Pillar 1 goals. But we also wanted to take a minute for Pillar 1, which is preparing our students, to hear from high school principal Casey Drake. If you remember, Casey Drake was here last fall talking about some of the major initiatives at the high school and the progress being made. He can now follow up with some year-end comments. And Mr. Drake, we're talking about Pillar 1, please take it away.
Thanks for having me tonight. So I guess tonight, really I'd like to highlight some positive things from this school year. Like Dr. Zalewski said, we had a lot of people with a lot of different roles that helped to get these results. Like I said, I just want to highlight a few. So ACT for our juniors, going to be seniors, did a nice job again this year. A couple of things that took place initially, we maybe thought we had taken a little bit of a step backwards, and it was kind of disappointing. However, ACT had a scoring issue, if you had not heard about that, and so all student scores were re-looked at, and then at least in Menominee High School, I would estimate maybe around 60 or 70% of the kids' scores increased a little bit, which bumped our average up, which was great. On top of that, science had been calculated in the composite score for a number of years prior to this year, and this year is the first year it's not. So when you looked at the initial score of 19.4 after that adjustment, compared to last year's, which was 20 even, it was still a little bit lower. However, last year's was with that science score in, which our science score normally is above our actual composite average. So when you kind of calculate that all together, and Brian can probably jump in here if he needs to, but it's somewhere around a 19.8 or 19.7 if we compare last year's with the adjustments to this year. So pretty close to what we had last year as well. And last year was one of the better ACT scores we've had in quite some time. So kind of getting through all of that, we're pretty happy with our ACT score for our going-to-be seniors, and looking forward to continue with that. It's one of the things that Dr. Zalewski mentioned too, is that we're making good progress, but this is still something we want to continue to prioritize as we go into the coming years. So that would be one. One of the things that I think we worked really hard on as a building is getting our kids to do well enough to pass in our courses. And we've been tracking for the last handful of years failure rates of our students within the school. And we look at different cohorts as they go through grade levels and then the whole building as well. And I think in the update that was provided in the board docs, we talked about first semester numbers. Since that's been submitted, we've also been able to calculate the second semester numbers, and this current, or the school year we just finished, second semester had the lowest building failure rate since before 2016-17, so like a 10-year period. I don't have any data prior to 16-17, so maybe it goes back even further than that, but it was 4.75 of all the classes with all the kids in the high school, only 4.75% were failures, which is really good for us. We've seen some numbers quite a bit higher than that, and we kind of can consistently have been seeing a downward trend in the failures, which is really can be attributed to the great classes that we have, teachers spending a lot of time with our students, the work that's going in during our study hall time, and just really a re-emphasis on making academics even more of a priority than it's been in the past. So that was some very positive news. Attendance, another area which we've been focusing on over the last handful of years. Kind of two different ways to look at attendance. One is chronic absenteeism, which is how the state scores us for our state report card. This is any student that is absent 10% or more throughout the school year, they would be considered chronically absent. So that's 17 days roughly in a school year, and this is not, the state does not look at it like they don't differentiate between excused or unexcused. So if my kid is sick and I call in my kid, that still counts as an absence and one of those 17 days in this model that the state has. So in 22-23, we had 31% of our students that met that. And this current year, we're at 21%. So a pretty big drop over the last handful of years with that. The other way attendance is measured is the overall building attendance rate. So this is just simply looking at all the kids in the building, all the class periods that they all attend for all 170 some days of school, what percent of the kids actually attending. We've seen an upward trend in that, which is great. in 22-23, we're at 88.7%, and this current year, we're at 91.8, so up just over 3% in those handful of years. At the same time, with that measurement, the state has also gone up, but the state's gone up less than 1%, where we're just over 3. So we're going at a little bit higher rate than what the state's doing. So that's some positive pieces there, but again, one of these things, I feel like we're in the middle of a positive trend. I celebrate for sure, but what can we do as we continue to go forward to keep moving that needle in the right direction? The last thing that I just want to highlight is the graduation rate. This current year, we have 97.1% of our kids graduating on time, which is wonderful. Just a few years ago, we were 94%, 92%, 93% the last couple of years. So this was a good year in terms of getting kids across the finish line and earning that diploma.
Before taking any questions from Mr. Drake, I just want to point out with those ACT scores, I know Mr. Drake's very humble, but last year when we had the report, that was the highest year on record for our school since ACT became a test that every student had to take. So last year was like the highest bar, and this year basically is right there. And that's 2 different cohorts of students with different makeups. And Brian and I have looked at it and talked a lot about it. But what happened at the high school was very, very impressive. So great job.
I was just curious, you mentioned all the different positive things that you've done to make sure that this is happening. I was wondering about cell phone. I'm wondering if it's more consistent and with all of that, because I know I talked to some students when I was there for, I think a civil class or whatever, civics class, and they were they understood why they couldn't have their phones out. They understood that, they weren't happy about it, but they understood, and I thought that was pretty cool, so I was just wondering how that's going.
Yeah, this has been an ongoing project for us too, just really limiting cell phone access for kids during the school day. This past year, we doubled down on that again. One of the things different this year than previous years, what we did, the administrative team had regular check-ins, different times of the day throughout the semester, where we would really just gather data in terms of getting into classrooms for the whole building, just seeing what we're seeing, and kind of jot down the data and then sharing that back up with staff. We recognize that sometimes students are going to misuse their technology in front of them, like their Chromebooks. They might try to sneak their phone when the teachers are across the room helping somebody else, and have that out as well. But limiting that and making what you mentioned as your comment, making kids very aware of why we're doing that, has really been helpful over the past couple of years. I'm happy to report too, like the results from what we were able to collect in terms of data and how often we see a student with a cell phone or trying to misuse their Chromebook for something that's not academic related. It's pretty low. And then that also gave us really good starting points and conversations with those staff members of, hey, I know you're working really hard with these 3 kids in a small group over here, but at the same time, something that should be happening in class is happening. They may have not been aware of that, but then for them to be able to address that with students as well was a positive. So I think that, from 2 years ago to this past year, I think we've taken some really good steps in that direction too.
Thank you.
All right, so if there's no more questions or discussion on pillar 1, are you ready to move on?
Yeah, we can keep moving. But again, ACP was a pillar 1, the high school improvement plan, pillar 1, great job. Pillar 2, the board actually has heard about pillar 2 quite a bit in the last several weeks. Tony Kwiatkowski gave her student services report, where the efforts around MLSS, multiple systems of support, and then also addressing bullying and harassment. Tony reported on that in June, earlier this month. So I just want to point out that the principals did a wonderful job with their relationship mapping results. This has been an ongoing goal for several years now, where we try to get every single student in our school district having at least one adult that they feel like they can trust. And you can see that the results were quite impressive again this past school year. Next, into pillar 3, that really is all about our staff, and Sam already went through the HR report today. So I think that was the biggest thing we wanted to highlight there. Also, as you know, we had our teacher compensation plan. We had some real good changes approved by the board there earlier in the year. So we feel like a lot has been done. And there's always more to do with professional development, but we think that there's been a lot of progress made in Pillar 3 with supporting our staff. Pillar 4, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna ask Katie Krieger to come up here and drive Jenny's device for a few minutes. Pillar 4 is about enhancing family and community partnerships, and we obviously have a lot of partnerships to celebrate. But also one of the things under Pillar 4 was that we wanted to do a better job of communications. And the board's well aware of Parent Square and the work that has been done for messaging from our building principals, from the district, from our teachers home to parents. But another piece to our puzzle is actually updating our school district website. So what's actually just gone live in the last, 48 hours or something, is our new school district website. I will say, anytime you roll out a new website, it's a bit under construction, but you can already really see some nice improvements. And from there, I'll ask Katie just to give you a little bit of a tour, and then also I want to talk about the feedback loop that we've created to make sure that we are able to get feedback from our stakeholders.
Sure. On the page, actually, I'll start with the feedback loop. Don't want to mess up Jenny's screen, so I'm kind of driving backwards here. But I do have a pop-up that comes up soliciting some feedback on the new site, and then once they clear it, it just stays on the site, and then we'll be able to go back to it, and then more permanently, it's also linked at the bottom of each of the school pages and the district page. You can see, we have district information on each of these. A parents and community section. And again, like Joe said, some things are under development, so some of the pages may be in progress of being created, but hidden until they're completed. Activities and athletics, some staff links, and our employment links. You'll also see we have popular links up here for some quick access. We have some nice icons for easy navigation to some of our main things. We have a lot of consistency between our building pages and district pages where we have a little more appealing images throughout. Consistent links to our strategic plan, which I think is a nice highlight. And then core values for the building. And then you can see the Parent Square posts, things that principals and Joe are sending out get posted to either the building or the district page, which is really nice. And then we have links. Right now you'll see mostly the activities calendar events, but they can click here and then see a full calendar too. So just a lot of nice quick highlights. Obviously much more graphically appealing than our site.
So just a few things to add. One of the most common complaints that we had about our old site was how it scaled to mobile devices. It was pretty poor. This new website scales very well to mobile devices, and we know that most people are accessing this information either on a phone or a tablet. So we're very happy with that. We know that there's gonna have to be some more work, but we've also heard from people in the past about the most important things, why they go to the website. We think that the calendar that is being built is much more accurate, and it's going to include more information that's going to be easier to access for family members, community members, and staff members. And then, like Katie said, to have those different sections, even though it scrolls a little bit different because it is made for mobile access, it really is pretty amazing to see how much information. School menu, for instance, I think that's always been number one, is where can we find the meal menu, the lunch menu. So we have those nice icons that Katie pointed out. But we don't need to go into much more detail tonight other than just to kind of show you an initial introduction. But what I'm really happy is we have that feedback loop so that as people are on the website and they can find things or don't find things, they can shoot us a note and then we can either help them or we can make a modification to the website. Lastly, I want to point out, and I know Katie has presented this in some of her other reports, this website is designed to be accessible. And there have been rules and regulations that have changed in terms of how websites can operate and how certain things that are loaded onto the website need to be able to be accessed by someone using a screen reader. We are really working hard to build our website in a way that is accessible. So it is going to be a change. For instance, we are going to upload our PDF version of the district calendar for one more year because the final rules and regulations don't go into effect until this coming April. And we know people are used to the one-page PDF, but we will be phasing that out after this next year. But we also feel that once people get used to our new calendar, we think it's actually going to be a better tool and it'll be more accessible. So we're trying to kind of move it in a gradual process to help people make the adjustment, while still being mindful of the importance of meeting all the rules and regulations. Any questions?
Overall, I just want to say it looks great. It is much easier to navigate, and looks nicer, and I really do appreciate those popular links at the top. One of my silly little kind of unimportant pet peeves was how far I had to scroll to get to Skyward Family Access. So I like that at the top. What is the plan for populating that activities calendar? Because I know that's something that I heard from a lot of people before, is that you didn't necessarily find everything. It kind of was dependent on, my understanding was previously dependent on kind of having coaches or advisors making the effort.
There were some real challenges with activity and athletics calendars. What I can tell you is that Mr. Riley, he's only been our activities director, I think this is going on his 3rd year now, and he's had to deal with 4 different adoptions of different decision by the different activities directors, not only in the Big Rivers Conference, but really in the state. And my understanding is that the last one was adopted for about 3 months and quickly abandoned. The one that's been adopted now, there's a lot of hope that it is not only better than what there was, but it also has the structural support where it's going to continue to get better. And one thing I'm really excited is not only does it have the sports schedules, but it also has concert schedules, for fine art schedules, and it's a one-stop shop. I've heard from so many parents and friends and community members, so what website do you actually go on to find the football schedule or the orchestra schedule? Because there were about 3 or 4 different avenues. This is all going to be a one-stop shop now, so we think that issue is fixed.
And you would anticipate being able to have the staff training to make sure that all gets populated, or is there a way that?
And actually, the way it happens, most items, it happens by the activities directors when they send contracts back and forth. When that contract is generated, it's automatically scheduled into the system. Now, there is going to be some local control and some local manipulation, especially at the middle school level. I know Katie's been working with staff at the middle school to make sure that their stuff gets updated because the activities directors don't contract out in the same way. But we think that there's been a workaround that should make it very accurate.
Great.
Any other questions?
As I was looking around, I noticed that in order to get a hold of a teacher, you have, instead of sending a direct email, it's like a place where you put in your information and then, they'll get back to you kind of thing, which I think is good. I think it makes people serious about when they wanna, contact somebody, which is good. And then I'm gonna just tell you a little bit, I thought it was pretty tech savvy. I run the live stream at my church every Sunday, but I learned something new that I didn't know. I'm thinking you're gonna laugh at me, but, because I laughed at myself. But when I went on the site, I was looking for the district email where I could access my email. And I couldn't find it, and I kept thinking, well, how am I gonna find it? I can get it from my phone, but it's there, but then how do I look at it when I need to have it bigger on my computer? So I was back and forth with Joe, texting about this, and he finally said, well, it's not gonna be on there because you can go to your Gmail account, it comes up and you put your email in. Duh. So anyhow, I just wanted to let you know that I didn't mean to cause so much disruption with that, but I learned something new.
Full disclosure, I had to ask Katie, and that's what she told me.
I will say,
another reason we went to the form as opposed to putting like email addresses in plain text, is partly because we want people to use ParentSquare, for that communication piece and direct messages, but also, we've talked a lot about cybersecurity and the number of phishing attacks, and when we have those addresses in plain text, it's really easy for AI bots and stuff to just scrape your website, collect all of those and start sending you all kinds of fun stuff. So that just puts an extra barrier between us and some of those other tools that are being used.
I think that's really smart.
Well, I'm good now that I understand.
Good. Okay, are there any other questions or discussion about the website in particular? Okay, thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. So to keep moving, and I know this is going a little bit long, that was pillar 4 in this engagement with the community. Pillar 5 really is about operating efficiently and managing our resources efficiently and effectively. And what I want to comment there, the board has done a great job all year, and what we've done with how we've dealt with our long-term debt, how we had our representative from Baird here. There's so many great examples, but we don't need to go into those details. What I want to point out for this last update is the very last item. And this is an item that the board added last summer, and it was about accountability. And it was about accountability for our strategic planning goals and a scorecard. And Brian has done a wonderful job over all the years, really creating scorecards. And Brian, if you could just maybe comment on the scorecard, and then I'm sure this is something we'll be loading to our website as well.
Taking that idea that we've used in the past and the desire to build in accountability for the strategic plan, this is a tool that will continue to grow over time, but as you look at the layout of the scorecard, and I'm not going to go through showing the pillars on it, but really the format is laid out where it has each goal for that. And then if you remember when we did the work on the strategic plan, you identified a list of identified key performance indicators, or KPIs, which is a very common piece for measuring organizational goals. And what this is doing is, it provides an opportunity for us to identify on an annual basis, but then also link in the work plan for each year of the strategic plan and track how we're doing on the goals. Now, you'll notice that what's listed right now is outcome and then, goals met for 24-25, because the majority of the KPIs that we have, that data lags about a year as we go through. So the updates that you get on a quarterly basis, talk about the work plans, but then as we take a look as that data trickles in, really like our school report cards that will come in the fall and things like that, then we'll be able to build for each year whether or not that outcome goal was met or not. And then, like I said, there's a spot then for each action or each work plan to be linked in, and then for us to track that over time. So as Joe said, the idea of linking this then to our website, like we've done in the past, but making it real easy to interpret for somebody who doesn't sit through those quarterly updates or attend this end of your meeting as well.
Yeah, this is really great, and I do appreciate the link. I think this is a good format where you've got the whole strategic plan and a very concise summary of those performance indicators, and then a link to the annual work plan, so that someone could track this and like kind of look at it without having to read through that 37-page document.
Full disclosure, when I started, it was really hard for me to get into the weeds, so.
I'm not surprised.
Based on some feedback from the team, we were able to get to work on this.
Great.
So that's our work plan update. Any other questions or comments?
I just want to acknowledge that this is the end of the yearly work plan, and it's just really, we've been joking about the length of this document, but it is really incredible to see the work that's been done, and the way that all of these very ambitious goals have been met throughout the year. So thank you to everybody. All right, if there's no further questions or discussion on the work plan, we will move on to discuss property insurance renewal for the Downsville school site.
Yeah, thanks Rachel, and thanks for the nice compliment on the work plan. And this is actually gonna be a little bit of a transitional agenda item, because then we're gonna talk about next year's work plan. But this is very important, and, as you know, with Downsville Elementary closed, there has been work with Adam Hakola, the Executive Director of Dunn County Economic Development. There's things in the works that the board will see some more, information on in July. But what we know is that we're still gonna have that building for a time period here, most likely for the rest of 2026 and maybe even into 2027. And in previous years, we were able to continue having that building insured through our normal district insurance. But I appreciate the legwork that Eric did. We no longer can have the building insured that way. So Eric, could you explain us a little bit about what that means for our insurance premiums for next year?
Sure, so as Joe said, so 25-26, our property coverage, our property premium was $161,000 for all properties. And that was because Liberty Mutual reluctantly added Downsville into that property plan. So then this next year for 26-27, we said we would no longer insure it because it is a vacant building. And vacant buildings are very difficult to insure, so they refused to do it. Our insurance, regular property insurance, went from $161,000 to $145,000, which again, that's without Downsville. Sounds like good news.
16,000?
Yes, correct. It went down about 16,000. However, then that means Downsville is not insured. So just a few days ago, our insurance broker was able to get coverage, and actually it started out as a premium of $53,000 just to insure Downsville, went down to $32,000, and now it is down to $25,000. So $25,000 is what it would be under a separate sort of coverage, a vacant property coverage. $25,000 plus a few like broker fees and inspection fee, or other fees that go along with it. So our regular insurance went down about 10% then, from 161 to 145. However, when you include the Downsville, and again that's around 25,000, our insurance costs would go up 11,000, or about 7% then for next year. That includes the insurance of Downsville, the vacant building coverage.
So the reason why we're bringing this to you is that we are planning to insure the property in Downsville, but we wanted to let you know that it is gonna be a net increase of about 10, 11,000, somewhere in there. We could have the option of self-insuring, not insuring the property, but I think politically that could be real problematic in the event that there was a major catastrophe. I think even though it's, hard to spend the money, I think it's a wise decision, and that's what we plan to do unless there's an objection from the board.
I just have a question, having never attempted to insure a vacant building myself, like what is the threshold of usage at which a insurer refuses to cover? Because that building is not being used on a daily basis, but I have understood from our maintenance reports that we are doing the work of, running the water and checking the heaters and doing the things, so it's far from an abandoned building. So I'm curious, and maybe you can't answer this, but like, what would Liberty Mutual take to say, like, you're taking care of this building?
And I'm not sure that, now I did work with Kevin, and he said, at minimum, there is a person in that building once every 2 weeks, but even it's more like once a week.
Right.
And I did express that to our broker to say, please sell that point, like there's still people in the building, it is not on a daily basis. But again, I'm not sure which threshold that is, but it was made clear that there are people in this building that still it is considered a vacant building.
I realize that you have no decision-making power. I just think that there ought to be a way to convince them. But any other questions or discussion about the insurance renewal?
Is it possible to get a refund if we were to sell the building?
I would have to ask, but I would guess there would be, yes.
Thank you.
I would imagine at some point that could also be part of the sale negotiation, you know, if we were at that point before the term ended.
In terms of the payments that we make on insurance,
We pay a lump sum at the beginning, but yes.
Well, is this something that we would need to vote on?
no, there's no need for a vote, we just wanted to make sure we kept the board informed.
Right, I do think it is the right decision to keep the building insured. So if there's no further questions or discussion, we'll move on to discussing strategic planning goals and major activities for 2026-27.
So it feels a little bit funny to do this right after we got done celebrating all the work we did in our past work plan. But this process really is envied by a lot of school districts. It is such a solid process to make sure that we're aligning our efforts with the will and expectations of the board and the community represented by the board members here. So one thing we did different this year is we made a more conscious effort to really reach out to our staff to see any suggestions that staff members have for how we can better accomplish the goals of our strategic plan. So I'm happy to say that there's more feedback into this preliminary draft than what we've had that I can remember. And it's very helpful. Certainly our administrative team has a lot of feedback as well. And the board, you know, throughout the meetings and the direction that you give us throughout the year. So you can see that we do have an initial draft of goals. It's pretty rigorous. There's multiple goals under each pillar. Some of the things like onboarding new staff members like Sam talked about tonight. Some of the things with pillar 1, with continuing our work with our curriculum mapping and our academic career plans. Those things are already reflected in here. But I wanted to take an opportunity to see if the board has additional thoughts. Ultimately, we would like to bring this back to you for your approval so that we have kind of a stamped work plan for moving forward. But now would be a great time in case there are additional goals that we need to work on developing and bring back to you before you approve it.
Something I'm sure you're gonna do anyway, but I think it's worth noting. I think this probably was your pillar 5, is that a year from now will be the next discussion in the legislature of the budget cycle. And so you'll probably be tracking that with WASDA, et cetera, and trying to understand what impacts our state funding changes and all the other efforts that go along with that.
I think that's perfect, Dave. We'll draft up something for the board to consider. Thank you, great input.
To that end, in pillar 5, I was also curious, you know, last year we had I'm not gonna find it, I'm not gonna do it. But last year we had an item that had to do with communicating about the financial situation of the school district and the needs that will be coming in the future. And I don't see that here, and I don't think you'll stop doing it. But I think that it's something to, I would like to see it kept in there, if that makes sense.
You know, that's a good point. And also, I know the board has been doing a lot of work with the communications plan. I wonder if pillar 4 might not be a bad spot for something about, because really this is a kind of a directing the administrative team and the staff for the district, but direction to support the board's efforts with the communication plan might be a reasonable goal for pillar 4. Do you think that is?
Yeah.
I had a question about the first item in pillar 3, to maximize staff efficacy, building principles will facilitate the collaborative renewal, et cetera, et cetera. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I love the question, Rachel, and this is something that we've talked about with the administrative team, especially the building principals. And I'm sure board members, you've heard of the research done by John Hattie, and talking about effect size, and how there's all sorts of different things that schools have done to try to increase student achievement. And John Hattie did research, and whether it be talking about lower class sizes, or using, you know, the newest bells and whistles in the classroom, whatever it may be. And then different measurements have taken place to try to see what kind of effect that those changes have had on student achievement. And one of the greatest things that schools have been successful with is increasing collective teacher efficacy. And really what that means is that the teachers believe that what they do can have an impact on student achievement. It can have an impact on how much our kids are learning. And our principals and our teachers have done such a great job, but with all the different initiatives that have taken place over the years, I do think there's been a little bit, some fractioning of collective efficacy especially at the building level. So much of it has come from the board to district administration, to building level administration, to our departments and into the classroom. Whereas if we could really build up, I think, the efficacy at the building level, with our principals, working with our teachers, I think there's some real opportunity there. And that's really what this is about, is really empowering our building level people to do what it takes to impact our kids in a positive manner. So I can maybe change the wording on that a little bit to make it a little more understandable, but that's what that is.
Thank you, I'm glad I asked. I think that's a really great initiative. In terms of tweaking the wording, you use the term collective efficacy, which is not in here, and I wonder if that would be helpful to say, to maximize collective efficacy rather than staff efficacy. Because the way I read it at first kind of sounded like individual staff members' efficacy, and that's not what you're talking about.
No, and I think I will work with the principals to see maybe with the same meaning behind it, is there a way to make it more understandable? I will say that what Hattie's terminology says is collective teacher efficacy. And I think it's so important to include more than just our teachers. That's why I changed teachers staff. But I did miss the collective piece. I think that needs to be in there.
And I don't need to micromanage your wording.
No, I appreciate it.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and it actually now sort of obviates the next question I was gonna ask, but I'll just say it anyway, because another thing I didn't see in here, under pillar 3 was, we're going back to our strategic plan, under engaging our staff. We really talk, there's action plan items about amplifying two-way communication, increasing staff collaboration, cultivating a supportive working environment. I actually think that effort could potentially really have a huge impact under that, under those goals under pillar 3. So makes a lot of sense.
Just to be clear, are you talking about the ones that are already there or adding something else?
Yeah, so sorry. Prior to hearing your answer to that, my question about that bullet point, I had thought that the goals that you have listed under pillar 3, didn't quite get at some of those things in our work plan, or in our strategic plan. But now hearing more detail about that collective efficacy piece, that seems like it really does get at the thing I thought was missing. That's the second time, thank you. Other questions or discussion?
I was happy to see the attention to attendance, and Casey mentioned that earlier too. Continuing that goal to improve student attendance.
And this is, so you have mentioned, I see somebody caught in misspelling of building principles. You have mentioned that this would be something you would bring back to have kind of the board stamp of approval on. Do you have, is this something that if board members are contemplating this over the coming weeks, that we could still submit input on, or when it comes to ideas that come to in terms of tweaking some of these, not maybe wholesale new items, but is that something that people could continue to reach out to you about over the next couple of weeks, or what's the timeline?
Absolutely. It would be nice to have this approved this summer. We're already working on these things, honestly, whether or not they're actually in the work plan. At the same time, it is nice to have that written direction, and there has to be some limitation as well. I think you all appreciate that. If it can get approved next time, that's fine. If it had to get pushed to the end of July, I don't think that's that big of a deal. certainly we would really like to have it done before our staff come back in August, if at all possible, because we do make a big deal out of this, with our building principals. And then when they start their, beginning of the year in-service training and everything. But people can reach out to me individually. I think, having those conversations sometimes is the best way to do it. But we also could have group discussion, and if it's not ready for approval, we'll probably put it on the action agenda next time. But if it's not ready for approval based on discussion, it could always be bumped for another meeting.
That sounds great. And I meant to say at the beginning, we kind of dived right into, getting into the details, but I also just wanted to note that when I read this, I really saw a lot of, the things we've been talking about, the things Sam talked about earlier, the ACP, like, the progress toward our goals for last year, the things that, Casey was saying earlier, like, really is just reflected in here. So I was impressed with how much it seemed to reflect what my understanding as a board member is of what we need to do. Appreciate that.
And thank you. I agree. I think it's a good mix of stuff that has already been initiated but needs to be continued, and then also new initiatives. I think it's a good mix of that. And then I think the suggestions that I wrote down about the state budget work, supporting the communications plan, and then updating that collective advocacy, I think those are three really good suggestions.
I also concur. I have a question. In pillar 3, I apologize if I missed it because I stepped out for a second, but the comprehensive for your PD needs assessment, I'm curious what that looks like, and like the 75% staff response rate. I'm curious about that too, because our collecting opinions rate tends to be quite lower. So I'm just curious what that kind of looks like.
Yep, and I can jump in with this one. Historically, the time that I've been in the district, and it predates me, on a 3-year cycle, we have a survey that goes out to our staff, and it asks them a series of questions related to their own individual needs, what they perceive as needs, and then we use that to help build out our professional development plan over time. What I will say is we generally fall somewhere between 60 and 80% response rate, because we I think have shown time and time again that are off of that information. And we sometimes have to send out reminders, and we always send out a few reminders with that. But identifying that response rate, and that way we know we really are hearing from a majority of our staff. One of the things that we try really hard to do when we push that survey out, we then also take a look at our other data that's available to see, do we have an alignment between what our student academic data is telling us and our behavioral data is telling us, and what our staff are also saying that they see as needs, to determine where some of those pieces fit. But then also, when we take a look at that piece, then we report out on, really it's a you said, we did, so trying to clearly identify when staff and what staff groups have identified specific types of PPDs. So like Sam was talking about onboarding for hourly and paraeducators and things like that. The last go around, that was an area that really popped on that needs assessment.
Cool, thank you.
And Brian, what's a typical response rate? It's not 75%. Is it? I missed that.
Generally, we're between like 60, to 80%.
So you're looking at increase, yeah, sorry.
I don't know if this is Brian or Jonah, whoever wants to. I am curious to know, so is this the same 3-year cycle we've been doing, or is it something new?
So it's the same cycle.
Is there anything changing about it? Because we haven't had really great results about exit surveys on PV and how it's going in the district. So I'm wondering if we're thinking about doing something different that we haven't done before, so that we can plan differently.
So As far as doing the comprehensive needs, the PD needs assessment, that's a 3-year cycle. But then when we also do the staff engagement survey, that's one of the areas where we also draw that satisfaction with PD. So we couple those together, and that happens on a different cycle.
But to Michelle's point, and I understand what you're saying, Michelle, what are we gonna do different to be more effective with PD? Because this needs assessment hasn't served us as well as it could. I would say that one, increase in response rate, that would be one thing, but perhaps we need to go back to the drawing board a little bit before the next meeting and see how else we can improve this to make it better.
I'm getting maybe something completely different, and I don't have a suggestion for you, so it's not like I know the answer. I just think there's gotta be something we can do differently than we have in the past, and I'm concerned if we don't, because that was a big need that we heard from our staff.
I don't have it in front of me, but now that Michelle says this, I do remember that the PD satisfaction was, one of the lowest scores we had on the staff survey last fall, right?
Yep, that's correct. And one of the things that we did as follow-up with that was we hosted a series of building listening sessions specific on professional development. So, as we're talking, and I think Joe's point of, what are some things that we'll do differently, to come back and take a look at that, really digging into what some of that initial feedback was and looking at the types of questions that we ask on our needs assessment survey for staff to determine whether or not we're really getting to the heart of what it is that staff were saying they were looking for.
Would that potentially include, you talk about this, so this item, says a comprehensive 3-year professional development needs assessment. And that typically that is mostly done through a survey, right? What would it make sense to also consider including things like maybe a focus group or listening sessions or things like that in addition to the survey?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We'll rework it a little bit.
Which actually isn't necessarily like, contrary to what's already written here.
Can I throw one more thought out? I know everyone's trying, so that's not at all what I'm trying to say, but, I'm just wondering if something, and I'll throw this out there, so just it's on your radar, but if there's something completely different that's not about a survey with staff. Because a lot of times we're working so hard with educators that we don't know what's new and innovative out there, because if we did, we'd be doing it. So we don't know what to offer in a survey. Hey, I wanna do this, because we don't know what's there. I mean, we know some things, but what can we do to wow teachers and relight their fires however often for PDs when things they may not be expecting?
That's kind of connected to, I thought I had to, I think earlier in the HR report, I was noticing like our staff is really close to approaching like 50% is like 5 years and under, I think is what the number was, 40-something%. And so when we look at like things we've traditionally done, like Ed Camp, like what does that look like when half of your staff is very new and like, and then like you were saying, Michelle, in terms of, are we leaning on the other less than half of staff that are veterans versus bringing people in? It's all things to consider, but I appreciate that that you've been having the conversation and that we're continuing it.
I'm going to reluctantly suggest an entirely new bullet point. I've been trying to figure out how to phrase this in a way that's not too onerous, but I do think it's very important. This is either being pillar 1 or pillar 2. One of the kind of, in the general commentary, I kind of hear from people about like what they're concerned about in education. And in terms of comparing students and supporting students, like the big elephant in the room is obviously AI, and not only what effect it has on career paths, which we've talked about. There's that statistics in your report, which were great. But then also, how is it affecting the classroom learning in various forms, positive and negative? And I think the simplest thing to do might be at some point in the year to have some initial kind of baby report, whatever that means, and whatever you think is the most salient thing to say. And then each year we can look and say, okay, what are the questions we got, and keep building in that way, like, not don't make a 30-page report, but like, what are the kind of a brief spectrum of how different teachers may or may not be using tools. We've talked about this in various conversations. I think it's a big enough topic that warrants having a dedicated time at some point in the coming year, even if it's just an initial step.
The idea of starting with like a baby report with some really just initial information to build on, like, that could even be in the beginning anecdotal, you know, I think it would be really helpful for us to hear things about like, how is the social studies department using this, and what does one teacher have to say that's still like useful at this stage in the game?
Yeah, I think we could build upon what we had last time, but then also maybe have some baseline indicators that we could continue to measure over time. Yeah, we can do that. Anybody else?
Excellent. Again, we will have this on the agenda for next time as an action item, but we could continue the discussion as necessary. Where are we? Discuss updates to voucher transparency advocacy. All right, so since our last meeting, we got some bad news from the city administrator. After the city council had initially had a really positive reception to our presentation, they had heard from the county treasurer that the county was not willing to make changes to the tax statements. And that information came from the city administrator, but would potentially apply to all municipalities as a county issue. And since that time, Joe was able to be in contact with the county manager. Do you want to say anything more about what he said?
I think you pretty much nailed it, but there was a statewide clerks conference, and at that point, Department of Revenue advised the county clerks not to be messing with the tax bills. Part of it is every other number on the bill, my understanding is mandated by state law, and it's also, those numbers are also essentially certified through state processes. I kind of argued that technically the voucher dollars are as well, but it doesn't sound like there's much of an opportunity there. In the event that we wanted to continue down this road, more than likely it would require some sort of insert. I appreciate Dan Dunbar, he was really helpful with the information. An insert would probably be around $3,500 just for the city, and then the other municipalities would need to be added to that. I think some cities have paid for that. I don't think we probably could count on that here, based on city budgets right now, but that's kind of where things are at.
Based on that discussion, I had reached out to Wisconsin Public Education Network, and I wasn't able to have a conversation with those folks in time for this meeting. I do think that it seems quite possible, likely even, that this information that came from the Department of Revenue was in response to this effort by the Wisconsin Public Education Network that's been going on statewide. I think that information might be new to those folks too, doing the organizing, and so I am interested to hear what they have to say about how they might change strategy at this point. As Joe mentioned, we could continue to pursue this, but we would be looking at, first of all, it would be a separate piece of paper, and it would be cost to the district. I'm curious to hear what other people think. My suggestion, I think, would be to put this on pause until we get more information from WePen about what their kind of responses to this are, which means we could put it on a future agenda once I've heard more information from them. But I'm curious to hear what everyone thinks.
This is very disappointing because I feel like I've worked on this for 18 solid years and we're not getting anywhere. So it is very disappointing. But I really appreciate you, Rachel, because my next question was, and you answered it for me, was to contact WPN to find out what they can do, because they've worked with this before, and how can other cities do it and then we're not able to? You know, Claire and Green Bay, it just doesn't make sense. So I do hope that you find some good information for next steps.
Yeah, and so there's, just for some clarification, some of these cities have approved it for next year's tax bills, and those cities are also now hearing from their county managers, staff, treasurers, that they are not willing to do it. And now this is relatively, to me, new information, that is also coming as a directive or advice from the Department of Revenue, which I think makes things a little more complicated. I think there are actually only 1 or 2 cities that did get them on the tax bills for last year, and the other places where municipalities had agreed to do it was for this year.
Thank you for the information, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought maybe, that other districts had a way in that we didn't, but if that's the case for the state, that's very unfortunate.
I do think we are taking the same path that most of those other districts are taking, so I'm not sure that there's like another door. But again, I think we had actually had a staff retreat today, so I wasn't able to get through to them before this meeting.
And obviously, depending on what WePen advises, that could influence the board. Otherwise, the next agenda item about the board ad hoc communications committee, maybe the focus needs to shift more towards that in terms of the voucher transparency.
Did you ask?
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
No, we're good.
Great minds. Yes.
I was gonna say we may have a topic for the first article.
I was also going to make that point, but I also was curious, so if last I heard, we still have 2 township meetings, have you canceled those, or what's the status?
I have not canceled those yet. That's a good question. We had talked, Ed and I had talked prior to this last piece of information about the Department of Revenue advice, about continuing to have those conversations with the townships. I do think this changes things. And I'm not sure that it is a good use of our or their time to have those.
I think it'd also be an awkward conversation to talk about the topic of school taxes and then bring in the whole but the county isn't blah, 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 yeah. Might be better to either, cancel or postpone those until we have clarification on what is even plausible.
Yeah, so what I could do, this week is reach back out to the town clerks that I had heard from, and maybe even the ones I hadn't, and give that piece of updated information, and maybe just say that we may come back to them when we have more.
Yeah, I don't think you have to fill in all the historical details here.
Oh, sure, no,
Right,
yeah.
just, you say we're gonna put this on hold for now, and we'll come back later.
Yes, sounds good.
Was that an absolute hard no, or was it a hard no on that change we were requesting, or was it a hard no that we can't change anything? Because we could just retitle that line, so that how many school district, public and private schools have been, something different.
The initial rejection that came from our Dunn County treasurer was a hard no on any language added to the tax statement. In terms of what the Department of Revenue has advised to counties throughout the state, I think that is also, I think that's consistent, right? I think it's no new language. But I don't know much about that. And I also don't know how official it is.
You said that came from the County Clerks Association meeting?
My understanding, and we're playing a game of telephone now, is that, the county clerks had a statewide conference and the Department of Revenue was there and commented. And I believe Green Bay was the poster child.
Yeah.
And I also want to point out, Mr. Drake and Mrs. Drow, you guys are welcome to head out whenever you want. I appreciate you staying so long. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion on voucher transparency? I will continue to update folks as soon as I have anything else to say. All right, moving on, dovetailing nicely, we have an update from our ad hoc committee for school advocacy communications.
Okay, so Jay, Michelle and I met and looked through the document and couldn't find any way to pare it down. Because we just think it's very, it's all inclusive, all of it goes together. It was hard to find something that, to pare down. So our solution to that was to split off the community listening addendum because it is slightly different than the communication piece, to make our communication plan document a little bit shorter. Nothing has necessarily changed in it besides the split. So tonight we're just looking for feedback from the board. Do we want to keep the community listening sessions as a part of this because it is a heavier lift and more commitment? I would be happy to organize and take on that part with some help if that's something the board agrees is important. I personally think it is because it goes along with, you know, everything we've been trying to do as a board over the last couple of years with transparency and communication and, you know, the community. So that's step one, we're looking for feedback from that. And then we have like immediate next steps, which I think we kind of solved tonight what our first article is going to be about. An article for the next community newsletter or school crossings or something, setting the stage and launching our plan. And then also getting board input on finalizing a year-long editorial calendar. Yeah, so pretty much, I guess start with those things as feedback for us. Your last feedback was to pare it down, which we didn't do. But we are really open to any suggestions and guidance.
I'd be happy to help with the community listening engagement sessions, so count me in for that. And I think exactly what you just said, Angela, and how we have been trying to develop that trust, transparency, and communication within the community is what we need to continue. And that was evident on the school perception survey of the 19% increase of where the board is going. And I need to keep that momentum going forward. So count me in to help.
I would be glad to help as well, and to me it's imperative, if you remember, and not all of you were on the board at the time, but remember we did those listening sessions before, you know, it was kind of on the cuff and we, you know, were really, it was more about, you know, why we couldn't pass a referendum kind of questions. But I had heard so many cool things from people about those discussions and about being able to have people in public places and just talking about what was on their hearts and brains, whether we could solve the problem or not. It was just the idea that they were being able to be heard. And I just think it's a very imperative. And to me, of course, I'm retired, so I have a little extra time on my hands sometimes, but, you know, I'd be willing to help out and, you know, be happy to work with that and be at some of those listening sessions if possible.
I just wanted to express support for you not tearing down the plan. Because I think, you know, it is an overwhelming document, but I also think that I appreciate like thinking more about, you know, what are, here's where we're dividing off on the community listening sessions. I think that having this complete plan, this 8 or 9 pages or whatever it is, as like our kind of guiding document, while we tackle consumable pieces of it, and keep on track with that, it makes a lot of sense to me. So in your, I guess, I'll let anyone else reflect if they have. Go ahead.
I think it's a great plan and document that I'd be willing to help as needed.
Yeah, thank you for the support for the community listening sessions. As we all know, you know, you can put as much information out there as possible, and getting people to read is sometimes hard. So I think it's, you know, talking to people face to face and being out and showing how much we care about these things will really get more conversation going and more interest in it. So thank you.
If I could offer a suggestion, Jenny has been working a lot this summer already on her back to school newsletter. And by the end of July, it goes to the printer. I think that's a terrific opportunity for the board to set the stage and possibly even include a scheduled listening sessions. But we would need to know sooner than later, especially how much space would be needed, because, what is it, 4 pages? It's kind of like if we add 1 page, we almost need to add 4. So which we can do, because there's always more we can add, but if that's going to happen, then we are gonna have to create more content. Or we could shift things around in a smaller part. So I don't need to know the answer to that tonight, but probably in the next couple of weeks.
Remind me, Joe, this is a separate set of notes, what's like an ideal deadline for getting content to you for the newsletter?
The end of July.
End of July.
Alright, but a plan, a heads up on what we're planning on doing for space before then.
Yes.
Next couple weeks, alright, cool. And what we had discussed, we met with Joe a couple of weeks ago, and we discussed this potentially for that first newsletter. I know we were talking about vouchers, but I think what we were discussing was more, let's use that as sort of setting the stage for future communications. I love the idea if we can land on some session dates for that, that'd be awesome.
If I may disagree with what several people said, I actually think that, a voucher communications piece would maybe be more, powerful, closer to tax data time.
Yeah, and I think we build that, so that was, so developing an article for the newsletter, some content for the newsletter, and then we have a sample editorial plan, making that more than sample with real dates and real topics. That we could all sort of approve and building that in on that timing, I think would be a great next step too.
Yeah, I think when we get into the details of the editorial plan, you know, pairing that with, some of our upcoming agenda items, like the calendar, board reports, pairing it with our, annual work plan, right, some of those things would make a lot of sense. Think about. So we have, as next steps, kind of launching that plan for community listening sessions. And the current ad hoc committee has some volunteers for people who would join in planning the listening session, so that's great. Writing that very first article, finalizing a year-long editorial calendar. Does the committee feel confident in those steps, or is this going to be more work than you thought you signed up for?
Not quite yet.
Okay. Glad to hear that.
Jojo. No, that's all what we had talked about, last week. I think we already have unofficial assignments for that we can formalize real quick, so that won't be a problem.
So our next board meeting is July 13th. Do you think by that point it might be possible to have, you know, kind of a sample article and maybe on the 13th, identify a schedule of fall listings? You won't need them for the whole year even, but maybe just some fall listening sessions that could be included in that newsletter. And maybe the board could review it on the 13th, and then from there, Jenny could add it to the newsletter.
Yeah, I think for sure myself, Amy, and Emily can get days together by then, so I'll take ownership of that part of it.
Yeah, I can draft up an article to circulate the plan with that, to supplement that.
I can help on that too, Angie, if you want another person. I definitely will help with listening sessions.
I think that I didn't say so, but I think probably all of us would be happy to help with the actual listening sessions. But we've got another number of people to help plan it, which I'm not signing up for. But I'll be there. This feels like a really good starting place. And again, I appreciate your willingness to, all three of you, and everyone else who volunteered, willingness to do this. And we'll keep checking in about kind of workload on that. Any other discussion on the topic of the Committee for School Ethics Communications?
Just good work, thanks.
Yes. All right, then let's move on to our next agenda item, review revisions to policy 171.2, agenda preparation and dissemination. So we've got a sample here, and hopefully this is clear to folks. Like, the idea with all those X's is that Joe has written up some sample language, and, you know, we could talk about what that time frame might look like or what would go in there. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I think I tried to take the discussion from the board, the last board meeting and the discussion the board had. And basically what it is saying is we're gonna try to put non-sensitive background out there before the meeting so that the public that come to the meeting can follow along. I don't know if the board wanted to put a specific, 2 hours or 1 hour or by noon, or maybe the X's aren't needed at all, just saying we're gonna get it out there before the meeting starts essentially. It's just the board directing me and Jenny what to do.
So remembering back to our last meeting, we kind of ended, I think, if I may summarize whatever I think we were at, is the board was pretty generally supportive of having public access available to most of our kind of board docs, background docs that don't have sensitive information prior to those meetings. And we talked about a number of different timelines, and I guess with those X's here, and the drafting of this policy change, right, I think there's an opportunity right now, if anyone has strong feelings, or thoughts on, what would be an appropriate sort of window to put in there, a timeline, or to not have one at all, but simply to have them directed to be available before the meeting. Are there thoughts on that?
My gut is to not have a specific time in order to give our admin flexibility. If we had a larger amount of people in the admin building, and it's there's always so much going on in preparation for these meetings. I think it might be best to offer flexibility.
I know Jenny and I would really appreciate that. I can tell you that my intent would be to try to do it before lunch, the day of the meeting. Cause we're not gonna wanna be doing this at 5:15. At the same time, there are meetings when it comes down to 5:15 and, a report has changed or a hiring, there are times when that would be necessary. So I think that flexibility would be helpful.
And I think it's maybe worth stating that, for me, I guess, if there was a report loaded up that had a corrected, a correction to it, or there was a small change, I would not think that this policy would require you to have that, last minute change in there. I guess that would be my understanding of the intent. The intent would be to have, a version available, and if there was a change or a last minute version or a document even came in at the last minute that you didn't have, I don't necessarily think that would be a violation of the policy change in my mind. I don't know if it was the same way.
I'm a Dominic, I don't feel like there needs to be if we were talking about, we're gonna do it a half an hour before the meeting, I think if that was the intent, I'd wanna push on having that be sooner. But hearing from you guys that's, your intent is much sooner than that, I don't feel like there's a need to hardwire that into a policy. At this point, we can always go back and adjust it if it's not satisfactory, right? It's not set in stone.
I think that's a really good point, that this is something we could revisit in a few months if there's, if we're encountering some kind of friction with it, or it's creating a hassle, it's something we could always, revisit.
I agree. I'm feeling like if we could have, an intent to do it and do our best to do it, get it done so that people can follow along when they need to, that is important. On the flip side, I think also we have to be thinking about the board having documents in a timely, in enough time that we are seeing things before the community is seeing them. So it's just like a balancing act. But I think that if we write the policy flexibly, then it's not going to be a huge impact when future board people come on, because they, these positions move, and unless it's changed later, I think the more flexibility we can have in there, the better.
So as the draft is written now, you could simply remove those placeholder X's, and it reads logically. Okay. So we would bring this back to the next meeting for an official vote. Go ahead.
My concern is, I don't wanna make a whole lot of work on administration. I think it's important to get it out there and I like the flexibility. But I guess my question is to administration and to Jenny especially, if you have to put everything out already on like Wednesday or Thursday, I guess we get our packets usually on Thursday from board docs, then you have to turn around and move those things into the public content. Is that gonna be a hardship on administration?
I'll take the answer to that. It is extra work, but we do the extra work right now because we wait till the meeting's over and then we move non-sensitive items. It is extra work, but Amy, I think it's worth it because I think the board should retain the board's privilege to have an opportunity to review the information before the public. And if we do it all at once on Thursday, the board would lose that privilege. So I think the way it's written and what we discussed tonight is very doable.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that, you know, that you do that, but I just wanted to get a feel for that. And if you think it's okay, then great, wonderful.
One last thing to do on Tuesday after having. Any final questions or discussion on that policy change? So we'll vote on that at our next meeting. Next up, we have the calendar of board reports. This is something that this is only for review. Is that correct? We are not going to be voting on this. This is just a general calendar of when we see various things throughout the year. I have one question about this, and it came to my mind when we were talking about the new website. Is this something, or is there a version of this that could be one of those like easy to access links on the website at some point? And maybe not in that, like, I somehow doubt it would be the most popular, so maybe not under that most popular, but somewhere else, so that if a person really wanted to know, hey, like, when do they talk about accountability report cards? Here's an easy clip to say, well, that's November.
It could be done. I'm a little hesitant just because I know how much it changes each year. Like some things, like setting the tax levy, that doesn't change. But there are a lot of things in here that move sometimes 6 weeks, especially with some of the reports. Part of it's for the convenience of the board and scheduling the meetings. Part of it's the ability of the team to get the data they need and the time to create the report. So this is such a rough document, I'd be a little cautious sharing it in that type of manner. If we wanted to create a different document that's more locked in with less information, that maybe that's something we could do in the future, but not with this one.
Yeah, I guess, excuse me, like if there was sort of a less specific version, right? November includes state accountability report cards, as an example. Because there's quite a bit of like specifics, even though we all kind of know that they move around.
But sometimes that goes to December.
Yeah,
I know what you're saying.
right. Any other questions or discussion on the calendar of board reports? All right, easy peasy. Then we have review of extracurricular staff contract requests, another informational report. Any questions or discussion on extracurricular staff contract requests?
I would like just to point out, and I know we're getting along here, I really appreciate some of our staff members being willing to help out in short-term situations, and especially when we look at girls swimming. Our coach had resigned, she's moving out of the area, and our boys swimming coach is going to team up and do a co-coaching with our assistant girls coach. That's a great solution. Also, Leslie Hastings did a wonderful job as our girls tennis coach. That starts like in 5 weeks, and she had a great opportunity at UW Eau Claire, so we totally appreciate and we're happy for her. But that put a huge dent into our coaching staff, and Bryce Supra, our boys coach, who also coaches boys basketball, is willing to step up. With all these people stepping up, it's getting harder and harder to find good coaches. We would be really in a tough situation, so thank you so much to these people.
Thank you for pointing that out. Any questions or discussion on the extracurricular staff contract requests? All right, so, items related to next meeting dates, board committees and reports. I just lost board docs, I'm sorry. Did you have something you wanted to bring up?
A couple things, and Katie might have to jump in too, but, with our school district photos, in my 12 years, I don't think we've really like scheduled a board photo session. We have had board members sometimes get their photo taken. That and the staff here at the ASC, we would like to schedule a time because it's included with our regular school pictures agreement. It's not gonna be an extra charge. We would like to schedule a time to have school board members to be able to stop in and have their picture taken at ASC. I know everyone's really busy and we're thinking maybe before a board meeting, but maybe in Katie, time period, like over the next 6 weeks maybe, or is it a month?
I think 6 weeks max, for going out. They want us to schedule before they obviously start taking all the back to school pictures, that they contracted with several districts for. So I would say early August at the latest.
So our next 3 board meetings, if one of those 3 would work, too bad we didn't have it tonight because everyone's here. And I know everyone has some traveling and things like that going on, but Jenny or I will work with the board to try to confirm a date in one of those next 3 board meeting nights to try to coincide that.
Can anybody say right now if they're going to miss any of the upcoming board meetings? Which one? July 8th?
July 13th.
July 13th.
I already talked with,
Yeah,
I've got a conflict in that.
so I think we'll look at August.
So August would be better for me.
Does anybody else have an issue with August 10th? So August 10th, thanks for doing that right now. It saves us work.
We're all here.
So we'll book it for August 10th and probably a little early, so it goes done before the meeting.
Like 5:15 or something, or.
We'll double check with the company, but yeah, maybe 5 or 5:15, something like that.
Excellent. All right, we have a closed session.
Sorry. Yeah, so I'm the representative on the Joint Review Board, and the Joint Review Board has a meeting on Wednesday, July 22nd at 11 a.m. I won't be able to make that meeting, so I let the Joint Review Board know that I either won't be there or we can send an alternate. So if anyone happens to be available on Wednesday, July 22nd at 11 a.m., usually the meetings are pretty short, I'm guessing roughly half an hour, maybe 40 minutes max.
Where are they?
They're at City Hall, right over there, so, yeah, they're at City Hall, in the City Council chambers.
Downtown, City Hall.
Yeah, Canonic City Hall, yeah.
Okay.
Because I know there's the Dunn County.
Yeah, no, it's right here at City Hall, off of 9th and it's the annual meeting, so I'll basically be reviewing the TIDs that have been approved or changed in the last year. There won't be anything dramatic, but if anyone's curious about reviewing, the building and, kind of city development plans, it's interesting to be there, so.
Let me check my calendar and I'll get back to you.
Rachel, I also, on the 14th of July, the Knapp Village Board meets, and I've been put on the agenda to talk about the Pleasantdale School, which is a one-room schoolhouse that sits next to the Knapp building, and what's going to happen to that school. And if anybody would like to join me at that meeting, that would be great. Or if you have any input, ideas of things that I should share or not share, I think personally, the building needs a lot of work. It's a great one-room schoolhouse. I've gone through it, and it's really impressive, but it needs some roof and a bunch of other work, and I don't know, in our budget, if we can afford to take care of a historical monument like that, maybe that's not in our students' best interest. So that's why I asked Joe if it would be appropriate to talk to the Knapp's Village about maybe them taking over this historic site. And I have done a little bit of research to see what kind of, help they could receive, grants and so on historical buildings, so I'm gonna share that with them. So, if anybody thinks that we shouldn't be getting rid of it, and we should spend several $1,000s on fixing it, well, I guess we need to know that too. And we have one more, school board meeting before the 14th, so bring your ideas.
Yeah, so if anybody wants it on the agenda, you can let me or Rachel know, but this is something that Eric and I have been working with, and appreciate Dale's involvement, because it was donated to the district, with a donation, this is years and years ago, with a donation that was supposed to be unkept. I understand why it hasn't been unkept recently, so there's a whole mechanism in place where the district would offer it back. But I think Dale's idea of working with the village is a good one. But if anybody has any questions, we can report more on the next meeting.
Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for, taking that on. So we have a closed session, tonight, so I would like to propose we take a 5-minute recess and return to our closed session. Thank you.